31,000 years ago, someone was buried inside a cave in Borneo. When archaeologists uncovered the skeleton, something was missing, the lower part of the left leg. But the bone hadn't simply broken after death. It had healed. Completely. Whatever happened to this person, they survived it for years. Researchers originally concluded that the leg had been deliberately amputated while they were still young. If they were right, someone removed part of a living human leg with prehistoric tools, and the patient survived another 6 to 9 years. No antibiotics, no hospital, no metal surgical instruments, just an enormous wound that somehow closed instead of killing them. And they are only one of 5 prehistoric humans whose skeletons record injuries that should have ended their stories, but their bones did something dead people's bones cannot do. They healed. Number 5, Saint Cesaire. Around 36,000 years ago, a young Neanderthal in what is now France took a violent blow to the head. The skull still carries the scar. Modern scans show that something sharp struck hard enough to fracture the bone and push part of it inward. Researchers concluded the wound was consistent with an impact from a sharp object, possibly during violence between individuals. In other words, somebody may have hit this Neanderthal directly in the skull. We don't know what the disagreement was about. Whatever it was, somebody appears to have taken it considerably further than an argument. A skull fracture is dangerous today. 36,000 years ago, there was no scan for internal bleeding, no surgeon to relieve pressure, and no understanding of infection. But Saint Cesaire one did not die when it happened. The edges of the fracture remodeled. New bone grew around the damaged area. That matters because dead bone does not heal. The scar proves this person stayed alive long enough for the skull to begin repairing itself. Exactly how long they survived is impossible to know, and we cannot prove what caused the wound. The bone gives us the injury, not the story behind it. But one thing is clear. Something fractured this Neanderthal's skull, and they survived. The next survivor was only a child, and their injury may have affected the rest of their life. Number 4. Qafzeh 11. Roughly 90,000 to 100,000 years ago, a child lived near Qafzeh Cave in what is now Israel. Archaeologists call them Qafzeh 11. They died at around 12 or 13. But several years earlier, probably around age 6, something smashed into the front of their skull. Part of the frontal bone was pushed inward. Modern reconstruction suggests the impact caused at least a moderate traumatic brain injury and may have damaged the brain beneath it. We do not know whether it was an accident or violence. What we do know is that the child survived. Researchers have suggested the injury could have affected movement, behavior, attention, or communication, and may have disrupted brain growth. Imagine dealing with that at 6 years old. No rehabilitation, no neurological treatment, no explanation for why the child might suddenly behave or move differently. Yet Qafzeh 11 lived for years afterwards, and when they eventually died, their body was deliberately buried. 2 deer antlers were placed close to the upper body and hands, apparently intentionally. We cannot know exactly what that meant, but the child survived severe head trauma, remained part of a group, and received unusual treatment in death. Number 3 survived something even stranger, because somebody deliberately opened his skull. Number 3. The Ensisheim Man. Around 7,000 years ago, a man in what is now France underwent prehistoric skull surgery. Twice. He was around 50 when he died, and his skull contained 2 large openings. The procedure is called trepanation, deliberately removing part of the skull by scraping, cutting, or drilling through the bone. Why prehistoric people did this is still debated. It may sometimes have been used to treat injury or illness. Other cases may have had ritual meanings. For the Ensisheim Man, we simply do not know. What we do know is that both openings were made while he was alive. One had healed completely. The second was enormous, roughly 9 centimeters across, and showed substantial healing too. 9 centimeters. That is not a tiny hole. And the people performing this procedure had prehistoric tools, their hands, and whatever knowledge had been passed down to them. Someone had to remove part of a living person's skull without fatally damaging what was underneath. Then, they had to keep him alive afterwards. Bleeding had to stop. The wound had to close. Infection had to be avoided. And the bone shows that his body had enough time to rebuild around both openings. He survived. Twice. At some point, the question stops being, how did he survive someone opening his skull? And becomes, why on earth did they do it again? He was not unique either. Trepanation appears repeatedly in prehistoric populations, and many skulls show healing. Some communities became surprisingly successful at doing one of the most alarming things imaginable, opening someone's skull and having them live afterwards. But number two involved losing far more than a piece of bone. Number two, the Borneo Amputee. Not everyone agrees that the Borneo case was surgery at all. The person from the beginning was buried inside Liang Tabo Cave around 31,000 years ago. They were probably around 20 when they died, and by then had lived without the lower part of their left leg for years. The surviving bone had completely remodeled. That part is clear. What caused the loss is where things get interesting. The original research team argued that the tibia and fibula had been deliberately severed while this person was still young. If so, whoever did it had to deal with major blood vessels, severe blood loss, an open wound, and infection. Yet the bone healed. Researchers found no obvious evidence of infection around the surviving limb and estimated another 6 to 9 years of life. Later, researchers challenged the surgical interpretation, arguing that severe accidental trauma might also explain the missing leg. So we cannot say with certainty that somebody deliberately removed it. But what we can say is remarkable enough. This person lost a substantial part of a limb while young, survived, healed, and kept living in prehistoric Borneo for years. And this was not easy terrain. Dense tropical forest, rivers, steep, uneven ground. Whatever happened, their life changed dramatically. Especially during recovery, moving, finding food, and protecting the wound would have been difficult, which makes one possibility hard to ignore. Other people probably mattered. Someone may have brought food, someone may have helped them move, someone may simply have stayed nearby while the wound healed. We cannot see that directly in the skeleton. But 6 to 9 more years tells us this person adapted somehow. And number one takes that idea much further, because the final survivor did not lose one ability, he lost several. Number one, Shannidar 1. Shannidar 1 was discovered inside Shannidar Cave in northern Iraq. He lived roughly 45,000 to 35,000 years ago and survived to somewhere around 35 to 45 years old. Then researchers looked closely at his skeleton. The list of damage is extraordinary. At some point earlier in life, Shannidar 1 suffered a crushing injury to the left side of his face. His left eye was badly damaged. His vision may have been severely reduced or lost. His right arm was heavily withered. The forearm and hand were gone. His right leg and foot were damaged, and one foot bone shows a healed fracture. Together, those problems probably left him walking with an abnormal gait. Researchers also found severe bony growths in his ear canals. They probably caused substantial hearing loss. So, picture what Shannidar 1 was dealing with. One eye badly damaged, one arm ending above the forearm, difficulty walking, reduced hearing, and somehow he kept getting older. His injuries healed, he adapted, and he survived into what was, for a Neanderthal, later adulthood. This is where the story stops being about toughness, because toughness only gets you so far. Moving across rough terrain would have been harder. Hunting large animals would have been harder. Carrying heavy resources would have been harder. Reduced hearing could make danger harder to detect. Researchers have argued that Shannidar 1 probably survived with help from the people around him. We cannot know exactly what that help looked like. Maybe people shared food with him. Maybe they helped him travel. Maybe he performed tasks that did not require the abilities he had lost. And we should not imagine him as helpless. He had survived like this for years. Clearly, he had adapted. But a Neanderthal carrying this combination of impairments remained part of a mobile community, long enough for his injuries to heal and for him to grow older. For decades, Neanderthals were portrayed as primitive, brutal, barely human. Shannidar 1's skeleton tells a much more interesting story, because perhaps the most powerful prehistoric survival tool was never stone. It was never fire. It was never even strength. Sometimes it was another person. These skeletons do not prove prehistoric humans were impossible to kill. They show almost the opposite. They were vulnerable. Bones broke, bodies failed, accidents happen, violence happened, but healing leaves evidence. And every healed injury records time that person was not supposed to have. Sometimes survival came from skill, sometimes from extraordinary luck, and sometimes the evidence suggests another human simply refused to leave them behind. 30,000 years later, the people are gone. Their voices are gone, and even their names are gone, but the healing is still there. Subscribe to No Ordinary History for more stories like these.